Welcome everyone to the next edition of Conversations with the Code 9 Foundation. I'd like to welcome today Sergeant Stuart Charlesworth from Greater Manchester Police. Good morning Manchester time, Stewie.
Good morning. It's 9 a.m. or 10 past 9 on a typical rainy Manchester day.
I really appreciate your time, mate. And I was introduced to you during my Churchill Fellowship back in 2018 by Sergeant Martin Lally, who the listeners will probably remember I spoke to a couple of weeks ago. You've been good enough to agree to talk to us about a few things this morning, including your mental health journey after you attended a critical incident back in 2012, which is probably fair to say every police officer would dread to attend. You're also a fellow Churchill Fellow, which I always find hard to say. And if it wasn't for COVID, Stewie, you probably would have already been out here and spent some time with me and had a look around Victoria Police, wouldn't you?
Everything's on hold, unfortunately, Greg.
We'll get you out here. But we really appreciate your time, mate. And look, before we go on, I just want to point out to the listeners that, before we go on, I think it's appropriate time now just to warn all our listeners that, there may be parts of our conversation that we have during this podcast that may activate some triggers and emotions in some of our listeners. And I just ask that they access their self-coping strategies and utilise any support services that they have access to and they know that assist them. So for anyone out there that might find some of this hard listening to, just make sure that you look after yourself. All right, Stewie, let's get going. To start us off, I suppose, a bit of an icebreaker fashion. Can you tell me a little bit about your policing career to date?
Yeah, of course I can. Right, I've got just over 25 years service in with the Greater Manchester Police. Started in September 1995, working on the response teams on the Stockport district. Did this for about 5 years and then moved into the divisional plainclothes unit for about 3 years. But I think my days of sitting in vans in winter with a camera are long gone. I think I might be getting too old for that. It's definitely a young man's game, that, if anyone's thinking about it.
Yeah.
Following this, I then worked in the tutor unit, which allowed me to do frontline work, which also tutoring new officers in the field. And I really enjoyed that. It was quite a rewarding time in my career, that. And whilst I was doing that, I was in more of a supervisory role, and I thought, I want to take my sergeant's exam. So I did that a couple of years later, was successful, and got promoted in 2008. So once we got promoted, it was my decision to move off the district, and then I moved to Tameside, which was a neighbouring one on the outskirts of Greater Manchester. Started as a sergeant on the response teams for about a year. Moved into the custody office, and then in 2011 I moved into the neighbourhood policing teams, which is where I've stayed ever since, under its various name changes. But yeah, that's what I'm doing now, neighbourhood policing sergeant.
So when you say a neighbourhood policing sergeant, what's your actual role there, Stewie?
Yeah, so you're more involved with more longer problem-solving issues, and you're dealing more with partners, so you're working alongside housing, social services. So whereas on the response teams, you will be responding to the initial job, you will deal with it, and then you'll go on to the next one. And if it is a longer-term problem, that will come to me, and me and my team would look at how can we deal with this, and are the police the best people to deal with it, or can we work alongside the housing authority or social services, that sort of thing.
And when you say your team, how many staff is your team made up of?
Yeah, with my team now, I've got 5 neighbourhood police officers, and I've got 4 police community support officers, which are basically civilian staff. I don't know whether you have the equivalent over there with yourselves, but they were brought in a few years ago, and they're supposed to be more the eyes and the ears of the community. So they get out a bit more in the community and do sort of meetings and things, and they're sort of the initial link between the police and the community that we're serving.
Yeah, I know when I was both in Manchester with you and Lels, and then when I was down in London with the Met Police and that, because they have the community policing officers as well. So they're just volunteers, are they, or do they get paid?
Oh no, they get paid. Yeah, they're salaried officers like everyone else.
Okay. Now,
yeah.
I know the answer to this, and most Australian coppers probably know it, but you guys perform your duties unarmed, or you don't carry firearms or anything, do you?
No, we don't carry firearms. We have a specialist firearms team, so if there is an incident involving a firearms, they will then come to and assess that and then ultimately deal with it. But as a rule, we don't carry firearms. We carry, we've just been issued with harbour spray. We used to have CS spray, but that's as far as we go.
And how do you, as an operational police officer, you and what your colleagues, are you comfortable with that, responding to critical incidents and that without being armed with a firearm?
Yeah, I think me personally I am, because I think that's all I've known. So if, you never know what job you're going to go to or what's going to be waiting for you when you get there. But the firearms laws in the UK are very, very strict, so there's not a lot of them out there. So the chances of you actually coming across it are quite slim. And I know these things do happen. But generally, the issues we face with violence are generally knives, I think.
Yeah, okay. And so 25 years, what did you do before you joined Greater Manchester Police?
I worked in a dairy, of all things. So I was out delivering milk at 3 o'clock in the morning. And again, Greg, that is a young man's game. There's no way I could do it now.
And was policing an ambition of yours as you were a young kid and going through school?
Yeah, I think I always wanted to join the police. My granddad served with Liverpool City Police for over 30 years, and I think that has always been my thing. So I think I had a lot of influence, even probably without me realising it. So it was always one of those things. I thought about doing it and then didn't, and I thought, you know what, I actually want to do this. So I made the decision to apply and got through. So everything I wanted to do.
Very good. Now, just a little bit around your personal life. You're married, you got kids, you got a family or anything like that?
Married, no children, but I've got 2 husky dogs.
Yep.
They keep me busy enough. So, so it's all good. Live out in the countryside, so go walking every day with them. It keeps me fit. Is
your wife a police officer?
Yes, she's a police inspector in the city of Manchester.
So
but I don't... Yeah, she's higher than me, but I don't call her boss, even though she is the boss anyway.
Well, that's what I was going to say. So she's the boss at home and the boss at work.
Yes, that's the one. Yeah, you know where I'm coming from.
Very good. All right, thanks for that, mate. Now, look, the next question is what I mentioned before about the guys and girls that are listening to consider their self-coping strategies. And I know we spent some time talking about it when I met you, and I know a lot of your work nowadays focuses around you doing a lot of presentations to other police officers and organisations around your experience. But I suppose this is the incident that you probably say started you on your mental health journey.
Yes, I would say so. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was a horrific incident back in September 2012 when essentially 2 of your team, constables Nicola Hughes and Fiona Bone, were ambushed and murdered when they were on duty.
Yes.
I don't want you to go into too much detail, Stewie, but can you just share a little bit of what sort of led to you being where you've been over the last few years?
Yeah, of course I can. Yeah, so like you say, it was the 18th of September in 2012, and I was the covering sergeant on that shift. It was just a normal day. We paraded everyone on as normal. We were having a bit of a laugh in the morning, as you do, and who's going to do what they're doing for the weekend, all that sort of talk. And then obviously the call came in. It was a false call by the person who did it. Reported a burglary, and then when the officers when Nicola and Fiona went to the door, he opened the door and basically executed them. So I was one of the attending officers at the scene, and I'm not going to describe it because obviously I think probably everyone can guess what it was like. But it genuinely took it out of me. It was so surreal. Is this really happening? And then in the sort of following sort of weeks, I don't really think anyone knew what to do. So I think we've talked about this before, Greg. I didn't really get any support in the beginning, and I genuinely think the force didn't know how to handle it. And again, I wasn't particularly up for any help because I didn't think there was anything wrong with me. The force never pushed it. So I knew there was an occupational health unit available, but I didn't really think it was for me. There was a number of reasons for that, Greg. I thought, well, I'm the sergeant, I'm the team leader, I need to be the strong one here, I'm supposed to be the one helping people out. And I had what I called events. So I thought basically timelines, because my thinking was I knew there was something not quite right, but I thought, well, once we get these sort of anniversaries out of the way, so once the funerals were done, I'd be fine. Once the court case was done, I'd be fine. The 1 year anniversary, etc. And I thought once they were out of the way, then I'll get myself back on track. Unfortunately, I didn't, and I just kept getting worse over the next couple of years.
Yeah, and that it really resonates with me when you mention it. I'm the sergeant. I'm meant to be the strong one. Now that's that's a feeling that you had yourself. But I sort of get the impression too that from a community perspective, you sort of feel like you owe that to the community as well as your colleagues, don't you? Because they're what they perceive as this bloke's meant. He's got all the pips on his shoulders or the stripes on his arm. Yeah. Did you feel that?
Yes, and again, because you think, you're the leader here and people come to you to solve their problems. So I sort of tried to make myself busy in a way, looking at other people's problems, and I was taking stuff on really. And what I was doing, I was just distracted from myself. But the way I was thinking at the time, I thought, well, I'm the sergeant, I need to be the strong one here. I can't seem to be, and the perception was at the time for me, I can't be seen to be weak.
Yeah,
and I think obviously there's a lot of stigma around, and that's not just for that incident, but I think that's just a general police culture as well. So I think that had a massive impact on me getting any help as well.
So that stigma, what sort of role do you think that stigma played in your health, Stu, or your lack of want to seek help? What did you feel? What describe us what that stigma did and what it is?
Yeah, I think I don't know. I don't think this is unique to certainly the police in the UK, and I'm sure it's across the board. But I think there's definitely a culture of just getting on with things. I've heard phrases like well, that's the job, or it's what we do, and I'm still hearing phrases even in the last couple of months like man up or grow a pair. Which that's just wrong for me. It's just wrong, but it does affect you, and probably subconsciously it affects you as well, which stops you getting the help that you need. And I think that as police officers, we see and deal with a lot of things that most people never experience in their life. And it's like I've always said, Greg, I think it is the job that we deal with, but that doesn't mean that you can't be affected by it. At the end of the day, we're still people, we're still human beings behind that uniform and behind that badge. And I think there's another side to it as well. And I did sort of look into this quite a lot really, because I thought, why is this stopping me getting the help? And I think as police officers, we're the ones that people call when they need help. And I think for an officer or a police staff member, all of a sudden the roles are reversed. And I genuinely think it's quite alien for us, because we think, well, hang on a minute, we're the problem solvers here, and it's us who need help. Yeah. So it's a bit alien for them. We're not used to it. I was speaking to another police officer about 6 months ago, and they said, and I'd never really thought about this, but I know it's out there, but he said there's a concern that, you might be seen as weak or not even up to being a police officer anymore. And I've always said, well, that's fine, but you just need to take that bit of a step back, show a bit of compassion to yourself, get that bit of help that you need just to get you back to the person that you were before. But we don't tend to do it. We tend to look after everyone else when we sort of put ourselves last, really, if at all.
And I suppose that also stands true, doesn't it, when you go back to the conversation we had before about you being the sergeant. As a leader, not only do you need to be healthy and in your best shape to do your job, to lead, but leading by example, by being proactive and getting early intervention is another form of leadership, isn't it?
Of course it is, yeah, because you need to be seen as almost the strong one who people can turn to. And like I say, if you're that person who's being seen as weak, or that's your perception of it, you think, well, how can I do my job?
So if you cast your mind back, Stu, before that incident, let's say, and you sort of agreed before that this was what started you on your mental health journey. So if we go back before that day, how often would you or your colleagues, or would you hear of any of your colleagues having any conversations about asking each other how you were, how you're travelling? Like, was it a common thing for you to check in on people from a psychological perspective, or was it just like taboo and we don't talk about it because of the culture?
I think, I've been asked this before, Greg, and when I think back, I can't think of any sort of specific instance where we've said, we've sat down, are we okay? Have we done this? And I have been to some, traumatic incidents over the years, as a lot of police officers have. And when I sat down, there was one in particular, and we talked about doing statements for the court case and various other things. And one of the officers says, right, is everyone all right? Yeah, and that's fine. And they said, right, get yourself a brew and get home. And that's how it was. It was just like crack on with it. But I can't think of any specific instance where we actually sat down and talked about it, because you just didn't do it.
Yeah, I know one of the best analogies I think I've heard about, you hear people say, if someone comes to work after breaking their leg, people will open doors for them and offer to pick them up and bring them into work, and generally their fridges and their freezers are full of lasagnas and cakes and all that. But if someone at your workplace is off work with a mental health injury, it's almost like we're scared that it's contagious and we don't even go and see them.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because you don't know what to do, you don't know what to say. Whereas I think talking about it is the best thing you can do. Yeah,
absolutely. Do you, at the time, how well did you know Nicola and Fiona, Stewie?
Yeah, I knew them as colleagues, so I got on with them well, but didn't really know each other outside of work. But I've talked to other sergeants about this as well, and you're probably the same, Greg, in your position. I think as a sergeant, you almost take on a parental role, and you sort of, you want to look after your staff as best you can.
Absolutely.
So it was definitely a sergeant BC relationship, but you still want to sort of look after them as best you can.
Yeah. Now you mentioned in the days after the incident, sort of no one really knew what to do.
No.
What sort of wellbeing services and support did GMP, Greater Manchester Police, what did they make available to you and other employees in light of the incident from a support and wellbeing perspective?
Yeah, I think the only thing that I can remember, and this is only my perception of it, was you can get referred to occupational health. They had the chaplaincy who were there, but it's a bit different in the UK from what when I'm speaking to yourself and other officers, and certainly in the US as well. The chaplaincy in the UK, they're not really seen as helpful. It's not someone that you would go to. And I've heard comments like, well, I'm not religious, so why would I go and speak to them? Well, so it's not really about that. They can offer help. They've got vast experience over the years. So, I mean, that's another thing I'll be looking at later on down the line, which is obviously I want to speak to yourself possibly next year when I get over. But I think the only thing that was made available to you, or they said could help you, was at the occupational health unit, and that's basically what they said, and that was it.
I know, we've got quite a vast, in Victoria Police, quite a vast chaplaincy unit.
Yeah.
And I know when you speak to our full-time chaplains, that's one of the things that they always say is, initially, from a stigma perspective, people don't want to speak to the chaplains because they think, I'm not religious.
Yes.
He's going to walk in with a Bible and he's going to want to sit down and pray with us.
Yeah.
But although they do obviously have that part of a role that they cannot, but they're nothing like that. They're more just another person to sit down and support you. And because they work in that sort of field, they're just general. They're just another form of support, aren't they?
Yeah, of course they are. Yeah, and like I said, and that's one of the things I want to speak to yourself and your units when you get there, to say how's that more acceptable. How have you managed to do that?
So, in the hours after the incident, Stewie, you mentioned that there wasn't really much available. So there was no, apart from your occupational health, did anyone specifically respond in person to provide support to all the employees that have been exposed to that tragedy? Or is it all left up to yourself to self-generate that?
Yeah, in the hours after it, everyone went to the sort of divisional headquarters at the time, and they had the bosses there, and they had the occupational health unit. They were already there, and people turned up. But I think it just seemed too much in one go, because I think people were still trying to comprehend what had gone on. And they weren't in a position to sort of speak to anyone, about what they were going through. Because I'll be honest with you, Greg, and myself, I didn't, it was one of those things. I thought, has this actually happened? Even though I'd been there and I'd seen it. And then it just seemed to sort of filter out a bit, really. And if you said you wanted the help, then you'd be referred. And if you didn't push it, or you just carried on, then you were just left to your own devices, really. And I don't think that was the fault of anyone. I genuinely don't think, like I said before, I just don't think they knew what to do with us.
Yeah. Have things changed for the better in GMP in that respect since those years?
Yeah.
So what would
I was. Yeah, sorry to cut you off then, Greg. We now have the TRIM officers,
yes.
The trauma risk management, which we never had at the time in 2012. So if there is any incident, whether it doesn't matter how traumatic it is or what type of thing it is, they will come down and they will speak to you, and it's not your normal how you feel, and it's almost what you're thinking about. They will do an assessment on you, a couple of weeks after the incident, because what they say is that you need a couple of weeks for your body to naturally sort of comprehend it and try and get your head around stuff. So they will come down, do a bit of an assessment on you, and if they think that you need the help, they will basically fast track you into the system. So that's becoming more acceptable. And obviously we've now got the peer support network. If you didn't want to go down the sort of official route, you could have someone there who you could speak to, very similar to your Code 9 Foundation from what you told me before. So we are getting there. It's just taking a bit longer than I would like to see it take. But we're on the right track.
Oh, it's good to hear. Good to hear.
Yeah.
So what were the first signs for you, Stewie, in the days and weeks after, or however, what were the first signs that you picked up that, hey, I'm actually not okay here, I think this has affected me?
Yeah, well, I think that the main one for me was lack of sleep patterns. I wanted to sleep at stupid hours in the day. I was staying awake all night. I had some horrendous mood swings as well, really bad, from manically high, I would say, to depressively low. And that could be like in the same day. I had a lot of flashbacks as well. They were quite strange, really. I couldn't really understand why they were happening, because you have your conscious triggers, like there might be a news report or somebody might be talking about it. But most of the time, there was no obvious reasons why I could see anyway, why I was having these flashbacks. So that was all going on. And just going back to the sleep thing, I mean, when you read about sleep, you don't realise how important it is until you actually start losing it. But I was having some horrendous nightmares, and I think that was contributing to my lack of sleep, because basically I didn't want to go to sleep, because I thought, if I do, I'm going to have nightmares. And my thinking at the time was, well, if I'm not asleep, I'm not going to have nightmares, which is true. But obviously you can't sustain that for any length of time. And there was other things as well. I called them down days, where I felt numb all the time, wasn't really bothered whether I lived or died. So I had no value on my own life and started thinking, was anyone else be bothered? So I had quite a distorted view on life and couldn't really see the importance of it. I started thinking, well, does it matter whether you're alive or dead? Just couldn't see any difference in it. So there was these sort of things that were building up and building up. But like I said, I just kept ignoring them, kept myself busy. I was taking on more than I should have. And really what I should have done is just took a step back and said, right, hang on a minute. Why are these things happening now? Why am I doing this? Why is this happening? I need some help. But I didn't. And it was only 4 years later, basically a breakdown that forced me to get into help.
Wow, 4 years, that's a long time to not have good sleep and not have good diet and all that, isn't it?
Yes, exactly, yeah. And when I look back, I think, I was an absolute mess, not only for me, but for the people around me. And it's funny because when I said, I spoke to my boss and I said, look, this is what's going on. I'm going to get some help. And I said, I think I might be suffering with this, that, and the other. And the first thing she said was, no shit. She said, are you the only person who couldn't see it? She said, we've been telling you, but you've not been listening. I said, have you? I said, I don't remember. Yeah. So, and that's how it was.
So, what was the main reason, Stewie, that you think back in that 4 year period, what was the main reason that you didn't go and seek help? What was preventing you from doing that?
Well, I think it goes right back to the start of the conversation, Greg. I think it was the whole, I'm the sergeant, I've got to carry on, I've got to be here, I've got to be seen to be strong, I'm the problem solver. And I think that, coupled with the fact of the police culture, not being seen as weak, is it going to affect me career prospects in any way? And I think that's what I did. I just had those, whether it was conscious or subconscious, but I just cracked on with it, and obviously it wasn't doing me any good at all.
Yeah. Is there, at the time, firstly, Stewie, at the time, or even when you went through the academy and all that, is there or was there any education for you officers at all at any stage around mental health and what it looks like and what the symptoms are, etc. at all?
No, there was none. Absolutely none.
And what about now?
Well, that's changed now, because as I'm one of the peer supporters myself now, so I'm in that group within the Greater Manchester Police. So when the new students come through, they have like a bit of an open day, and we'll be one of the people there, and we give them talks on what's available. And it's really good, because you'd be surprised how many people actually say, well, do you know what, I'm glad you're here because I suffered with this. So even the new cops who haven't even started really, they're actually opening up about their own mental health problems, and they're quite happy to talk about it. Whereas I think when we started, if you'd have said that you'd have been questioned, is this job for you?
Yes. Definitely.
So we're definitely going in the right direction, and the new students are getting that input at a very early stage as well.
So apart from the stigma, having just spoken about that education piece, Stewie, apart from the stigma, do you think there's an element too that you didn't actually know what was causing you to lose sleep, and if you had have been better educated about what these sort of things mean, that you might have been a bit more proactive?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, definitely. Because I've spoken to people about this, and they've said, "Oh, do you know what? That's similar things to what I'm going through." And then luckily they've gone on to get help. Whereas if they hadn't said anything, if they hadn't recognised in themselves, they'd have probably just gone down the same route as me, just getting worse and worse without even realising it.
And did you find, as you were going through those 4 years, that it started to have an impact at home as well?
Oh yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, and when I look back now, I just feel so bad. Genuinely, I do feel bad about it. But there's nothing I can do now. Whereas, obviously, if anything, I was lucky. My partner's in the job, and understood what went on the day and the subsequent years after. So there was a good understanding there, and that just give me quite a lot of leeway, really, I would say. Whereas now we're so much closer now, because we just talk about everything. Whereas before, if anything went wrong, I was quite happy to blame everyone and let them know about it as well. And a lot of the time, It was down to me.
Yeah. And it's an interesting discussion around having a partner that's in the same service as you, whether it's been a 2 police family, 2 fire family, 2 emergency call taker family, or whatever.
Yeah.
I know sometimes the culture in policing is that when you finish work, you don't want to talk about work, so you don't want to speak to your family about it. And that I even personally find that the case with my family, even though my wife's in the police force as well.
Yeah.
That you don't want to come home and burden them with talking about your work all day anyway, so you end up just carrying the burden yourself because you don't feel like you want to share it.
Yeah, and that's true. No, you couldn't put it any better. Yeah.
4 years, what was it at around about the 4 year mark when you decided to go and get help eventually? What was it, Stewie, you think that made the light go off inside that said, I have to go and do something?
Yeah, well, I know exactly where it was, Greg. The incident itself in 2012 was going to be possibly subject to a full review in court. So everyone who was there on the day, so including myself, from the day it happened to the subsequent weeks and months later, was all going to be subject to a review where I would have had to stand up in court. And it was then that I realised, I thought, all this stuff that I've been trying to hide and suppress, I can't do it anymore, because I'm going to have to open up now and tell everyone, what happened and speak about it. And the more I thought about it, I got more anxious. I couldn't breathe, and basically just had a breakdown.
Yeah.
And it was that point really that I thought, this can't go on. I'm not well. I thought it was, but basically I've just been kidding myself, and I need help.
And what was it that you actually did to go and get help? What did that look like?
Well, I referred myself to the occupational health unit. I don't know what it's like for yourselves, but within GMP, if you're suffering with any mental trauma, then you don't have to go via your supervisor. You can actually self-refer to the occupational health unit. I could have gone via my inspector, but I chose to do it myself because it was like an acknowledgement, really. Seeing my name on that piece of paper, it was an acknowledgement for me that I needed that help. Once I put the form through, I was quite happy to speak to my inspector, told him everything and, on the reasons why I'd not gone through them. I said, well, I'm quite happy to speak to you. I'll let you know everything that goes on. But basically, I wanted to do it myself. And I've always said that was probably the hardest thing I've had to do. And it's probably the hardest thing anyone's going to have to say is say that word, help.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you credit Stewie for, or what are some of the important things you think that you did that really turned your health around?
I think the main one for me was talking. I was referred to the welfare officer within a couple of days. And then following that, I had to go and see a CBT therapist. Mm-hmm. So what we did basically with them was just talk about the incident and just broke it down into small pieces and, why am I thinking this and what happened here, why you thought processes like that. But not only did I talk about it there, I talked about it to my wife, to my inspector, to other peer supporters as well. And what I found was, Greg, that the more I talked about it, the easier it became. And it gave me some sort of control over it. So rather it just sneaking up on me, I had the control. I was deciding when I was going to talk about it and when I was going to deal with it. I'm not going to lie, Greg, it's not easy. And I did get upset at a number of occasions over it. But what I did find is that the more that you talk about it, the more it normalises it. And it sort of lessens the impact of, the memories we're having on me. And that's not to take away, the importance of it, or it doesn't sort of reduce it in any way. But the trauma memories after, the more I talk about it, it sort of lessens the impact it was having on my day-to-day life.
And that normalising it is so important, I think, in the reduction of that stigma.
Yes,
it's one thing that I really focus on in my workplace is making it every day, as often as we can. We'll just generally in the workplace just talk about mental health in some capacity, so it normalises the conversation.
Yeah.
So when it comes to we've got to get our game faces on, something's happened here, people don't hesitate to talk about it because it's something they've got used to because we're doing it daily.
Yes, of course, yeah. No, you're right. You're exactly right. And I think that's, I'm trying to sort of get that across to my team as well. So if they can see me as their sort of sergeant and, I'm quite happy to talk about the issues I've gone through, then what I've found is people will talk to you a lot more. Absolutely. They'll open up a lot more, which is good. They're not taking it, they're not keeping it to themselves. They're not taking it home with them. They're actually getting it out there, like you say, and it's good. It's all positive.
And what things do you really concentrate on doing now, Stewie, that enables you to remain psychologically healthy?
Yeah, I try not to dwell too much on the past. It's still something that I think about every day, to some extent, whether it's a fleeting thought or it's something that, I think, let's have a think about this. But rather than suppress it, I think, why am I thinking about this now? What's the issues here? So I'll sit down when I've got my own time and I'll think, right, okay, well, we thought about that. That upset me. Why was that? And then just doing that. Physical wise, which I think helps you mentally anyway. Like I said before, I live in the countryside. I've got 2 dogs that I take out every day, and that just helps massively. So luckily I'm quite physically fit, so I can get out and do that. But the mental side of it, I just don't ignore anything anymore. So if there's something affecting me, I'll try and deal with it as best I can. And if I can't deal with it myself, then I'll ask for help. Yeah, I genuinely do ask for help.
And when you reflect back to the years after 2012, to listening to you talk now about what you do and your thoughts, wow, you've done a full 180-degree turn, haven't you?
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, without a doubt. I just wish I'd done it sooner, Greg. I really do.
Yeah, and which leads in perfectly to my next question, is around early intervention. What advice do you give to all those that are listening, Stewie, about from an early intervention perspective? What's your advice for them if they find themselves in a situation where they're not feeling well? How important is early intervention, and what is your advice to them?
Great. I can't stress enough the importance of early intervention, and that's one of the things that I want to look at when I do my research later on next year. It's very difficult to recognise the signs and what's going on. So some of the things I talked about there, I always say that if it's yourself, you're probably going to be the last person to see it. Whether that's ignorance or you're trying to ignore it or whatever it is, but your colleagues around you will generally see it before you do. So I always say look out for each other and try and recognise the signs. And if you do suffer with anything, seek early help. You know, whether it's via your peer support group or your Code 9 Foundation, whether it's via your occupational health unit, via your supervisor, because I think it's important for your supervisor because they're generally going to be the ones who you see most of the day. So I think just go to them and say, look, this is what I'm going through. It might be nothing, but can you have a look at it and see if there's anything you can do for me?
Yeah, it's great advice. Great advice. Just before we get to the last question, I know when I spent some time with you, you were telling me about, and you shared with me your presentation that you do a lot of now, which you find very cathartic as well. Just so the listeners know a little bit about what you do, just share the extra work that you do now that you go around and for helping others.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so I do a presentation on, it's called post-traumatic stress, and it's called My Recovery, basically. So once I'd finished my treatment in 2016, 2017, I wanted to try and give something back and help others who may have been in a similar position to me. Because I know what it was like, because I thought there was nothing there. So I thought, well, if people can see me talking about it and, you know, talking about the symptoms, etc., they may recognise it in themselves. So I've done a couple of these presentations across Greater Manchester Police to various departments. I've done it to the College of Policing, and I was also invited to a suicide prevention conference in Germany, which I did there.
Wow.
And the feedback I'm getting from it is really good. I don't really talk about the incident itself because, just like you said, everyone knows what happened or has got an idea what happened, so I don't need to talk about that. I just need to talk about what my thought processes were, the help that I got and what I did after it. So again, if people recognise that in themselves, you might think, do you know what, that's me, that I'm going to get help. Because when I started doing the presentations, I've had 2 or 3 people come up and say, I really appreciate it. And then they've gone on to get help from the occupational health unit. And it's like I said before, had they not seen that, they wouldn't have done it. They'd just been going down the path that, and just gradually getting worse. And I think one of the closing things that I finish off with on the presentation, Greg, is that I try and get across that it doesn't matter who you are, what your age is, what your experience is, what your rank is. If this affects you, then it's going to affect you. And I've always said, don't think just because you're the superintendent or you've got 25 years servicing that you can't be affected. Because that's what I did. I thought, this isn't me. It can't affect me because, I've got this, I'm the sergeant. And that's where I went wrong. And it didn't end too well for me, to be honest. So I try and get it across. It doesn't matter who you are or what you've done, your experience, etc. If you need help, you need help.
And I think even just your personal story, Stewie, though, is a great example of, yes, someone can be very unwell, but if you keep persevering and you get that help, you can get yourself out the other side to a point where you're at work and you're enjoying life, and it's possible, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And it's like I said, I still think about this, on a daily basis to varying degrees, but I'm still me. I'm back to where I was. And it's not took over my life. It's just part of my life now. And that's, I try and use that to help others.
Maybe you need to make sure, mate, that you bring that presentation out out to Australia with you, because I reckon...
Of course I will, yeah. Of course I will. More than happy to share it with whoever you want me to with.
Yeah, that'd be great. All right, mate, we'll get into the last question, and we've mentioned a couple of times that you're the recipient of a Churchill Fellowship over there in the UK. Could you tell us a little bit about what your research topic is, where you intend going, and what your purpose is?
Yeah, of course I can. Yeah, the Churchill project that I'm looking at is it's entitled PTSD in Policing. And the intention primarily is to look at how different forces across the world deal with officers who struggle with PTSD. And like I said earlier on, my primary aim is from early identification and any subsequent treatment. So it's more or less early intervention. How do you identify those officers and what do you do in the treatment after, and how quickly does that happen? Certainly within my force, and again, it's no criticism, it's just the way it is. We seem to wait for something to happen before we do something. And it's almost like we can see that train coming towards us, but we wait for it to crash before we do something. Yeah. Whereas my view is, well, if we can see it coming, why aren't we stopping it at that stop there and doing something about it? So, speaking to yourself and other officers in America, you seem to be quite a way ahead of us. And I just want to sort of, do some research on what you do and bring some of that good practice back and try and implement it in not only my own force, but across the UK as well. So my intention is to travel to America. And then going to Fairfax County in Washington, and then going with the NYPD, and then over to yourselves in Melbourne and see what Victoria Police do.
One thing I can tell you, Stewie, is that one of the best things that my Churchill Fellowship, apart from the research and all that, is the friendships you make.
Yes.
And the contacts you get. You're just one of, probably 20 to 30 people that I'm going to have lifelong contact with. Yes, they're police colleagues, but, it just opens so many doors for you professionally. And what I've learnt around mental health and policing and mental health and, I never even knew before I went to my Churchill Fellowship, right, that, physical health and diet and all this sort of stuff has so much of an impact on your psychological health.
Yeah.
The friendships and the knowledge that you pick up are just forever ongoing. So you're one of us now. So we really look forward to having you come out here. Thank you very much for putting aside some of your time on a Monday morning for us.
No, thank you. Yeah, well, I say it's an honour to be asked to do this, Craig. It genuinely is.
And just in case some of the listeners, Stewie, would be interested in reaching out and perhaps either asking some questions of you or touching base. Do you have an issue with that from either a social media perspective or an email perspective?
No, none at all. None at all.
So what would be the best way to get in contact with you if anyone's listening who wants to?
Yeah, probably my work's email is probably the best one to get hold of me on.
Yep.
Have you got the details you can put out there, Greg, or do you want to?
You just launch into it, mate. Over and if people don't get it, they can always contact me. But if you just want to give us your email address,
yeah, it's 09351, and that's at gmp.police.uk.
Okay, can you just repeat that one time again for us?
Yep, 09351 at gmp.police.uk.
Beautiful, thanks, mate. That'll be available to everyone, and hopefully, if someone wants to reach out and have a chat to you, it might even be that if someone does when you come out here for your research, we can hook you up with a heap of people.
Yeah, no problem at all.
That'd be great. Now, make sure you stay safe over there. I think you guys are got a little bit more COVID going on than us at the moment, so make sure you stay safe.
Just a bit, yeah.
Yeah, and do you catch up with Lels very often, Martin Lally very often?
Yeah, I speak to him every couple of weeks. Yes, I do. Yeah, he's doing okay.
I bet you he speaks more than you do, though.
I'm saying nothing, Greg. You said that, not me.
Oh, dear. All right, Stewie, thanks again for allowing us to share a bit of time with you. I'm sure everyone listening will have got something out of it that will benefit them in some way.
I hope so.
And we'll keep in touch, and I'm really looking forward to having you over here whenever COVID allows you to come down under.
Yeah.
And, just be safe, and thanks for your time.
No, thank you very much. And like I say, I just hope it'll help somebody.
Thanks, mate.